Look, back to your associate, please. Yeah, grab your pencil, head back. We're doing 19.1, 19.2, and 19.4. Today, all today. Okay, today we're talking about protists. What are protists? They're what?
Is that 14 or 9?
14, 19.1, 19.2, 19.4. What are protists? Yeah.
Is it related to prokaryotes?
Opposite. Plants are not protists, no.
Animals.
No.
Humans?
Fungus.
They're weird things. They're not bacteria. So recall, when we drew our tree of life, we had our first big division was what?
Prokaryotes and eukaryotes.
Yeah, prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Protists are eukaryotes. And our best definition for a protist is any eukaryote that is not a plant, animal, or what?
Bacteria.
Fungi?
Fungi, yeah. So let's back up. What's a eukaryote?
It's multicellular.
It's not always multicellular.
It's unicellular.
It's not always unicellular either. Sometimes it's unicellular, sometimes it's multicellular. So what else about the cell is distinctive?
Big.
It's larger, but what's inside it?
Oh, it.
Nucleus, yes. They have a nucleus and organelles. Or membrane-bound organelles, right? So mitochondria, chloroplasts, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So any eukaryotic cell, any cell with a nucleus that is not a protist, an animal or fungi, or plant, an animal or fungi is a protist. So we can see this when we draw like our little tree of life. I don't know why it's crunched up so tiny. So we have our eukaryotic branch here. We have our three kingdoms. Which two are more closely related? Plants or animals? Animals or fungi? Or plants or fungi?
Plants, fungi. Animals and fungi.
Animals and fungi, as it turns out. Yep. Yeah, animals are more closely related to fungi. We share a more recent common ancestor than we do with plants. Yeah, huh? A lot of our antibiotics come from fungi because they're more closely related. Fungi, what do they eat? Dead stuff. What do humans eat? Dead or live stuff. But we eat other stuff, right? Whereas plants get their energy from the sun. So they're completely different. Yep. In the yellow, sorry, nucleus and organelles. Eukaryotic organisms have a nucleus, they have an organelle. They have organelles. The protists are the weird things. They're not a monophyletic group. All plants are more closely related to other plants than they are to animals or fungi or whatever. All fungi are more closely related to each other than anything else. All animals are more closely related to other animals than any of us are to plants or fungi or whatever. Protists aren't that way at all. Some protists are like over here by the animals, some are more closely related to fungi, some are more closely related to this branch, some plants, some are way down at the base. And there's thousands and thousands of species that can branch off in kind of any old spot.
I agree.
So just note, we're going to talk about protists as if they're a group. They're not really an evolutionary group, at least. We'll talk about it in biology because they have some properties that are similar to each other. They're usually single cellular, but note that some will be more closely related to you and I than they are to other protists, right? Based on our evolutionary understanding.
What is a protist?
That's it. Our definition right up there. A eukaryote that is not a plant, animal, or fungi. Yeah.
I meant like.
Some examples?
See one.
We'll go through some examples. Okay. We're going to broadly put them into 3 categories. These are the worst categories ever, but we're going to stick with them because it's helpful. Nope. We're going to simply define them as animal-like, fungi-like, and then finally, plant-like, yeah. So, what do we mean by animal-like?
They reproduce.
It's not a real animal, so it doesn't reproduce sexually necessarily. But what types of things do animals do? Like go back to your basic like first grader understanding. This is an animal because it
It's part of the food chain.
Has a life.
has a life. They all have life.
Do they know?
How does a 7-year-old tell the difference between like an animal that's a cow and a plant that's a tree?
It walks.
It walks. These ones move around, right? Animal-like ones move from place to place. They eat other things, right? Okay, those are the animal-like ones. The plant-like ones act like plants. What do plants do?
They don't move.
They move less in case there's a lot that move actually. But where do they get their energy at least?
Sun.
Sun, yeah. The plant-like ones get their energy from the sun. The fungus-like ones, they're decomposers, right? They branch out with like big networks, stuff like that. So there's some of the properties are going to be the same. But keep in mind, just because we're talking about animal-like protists, they are not animals, right? That's why they're animal-like. All right, we'll start with the animal-like ones. And the first major group are the ciliates. Your book calls them Silipora. Silifora. I'm not going to test you on this term, but I'm just putting it down because that's what your book calls them, the Silifora. I'm just going to call them ciliates. We got a few types of ciliates. One of my favorites, they're these big ciliates that are, they got like this big horn thing. They're actually sessile. They usually like anchor down at this end. Sometimes they swim around, but they usually anchor this end, and then this end just hangs out and filter feeds. And they eat anything that comes along. They have little tiny cilia, but the cilia are usually used to like suck food into their mouth section. They don't have a true mouth, but they have like a part that can engulf things. Right? These are single-celled organisms. Another classic ciliate would be Paramecium. Let me draw it. Looks something kind of like this, like a Far Side cartoon. Okay, let's label some parts. What are these little hair-like things on the outside?
Leg.
Legs.
I'll give you a hint. What's the name of this group?
Ciliates.
The ciliates, yeah. So therefore these little hairs are?
Cells.
They're called cilia. Yeah, the stentor uses it. I forgot to label this. Stentor. The stentor uses the cilia just to like pull water in to filter feed. The paramecium uses the cilia to like actually swim through the water. Blake, head up, you can do this. Draw a little paramecium. Okay, a couple of extra little organelles that you might not have. This is a vacuole, specifically called a contractile vacuole. So a vacuole holds water, right? Like here's a water bottle somebody left. It holds water, but what would happen if I were to take the lid off and then like contract it? What would happen to the water?
They go out.
It would go out, exactly. That's what the contractile vacuole does, is it removes water. There's also these two little guys. I'll give you the name of the one, see if you can figure out the name of the other one. This one is called a macronuclei.
Micronuclei.
And the small one is called a
Micro.
micronuclei. Yeah, they have two nuclei, which is really weird. They have a big one and they have a small one. And they'll use them when they're the small one when it comes to mating. The big one's used just on like a day-to-day basis. So when they reproduce, so when these guys reproduce, they reproduce like a lot of other single-celled organisms, which is what? They just split apart. Exactly. Yep. So you got a big one.
It's like mitosis or something.
Yeah, and it splits apart into two smaller ones. Yeah, but it has to make a copy of everything inside first. This is binary fission. It has to do mitosis to double the nucleus, of course. Actually, all the nuclei. But yeah, it splits with binary fission. They can also do what the bacteria do, called conjugation. And this is when two ciliates love each other very much. They can actually fuse their membranes together. They start to share some cytoplasm. And then this is where those so they keep their big nuclei with them, but they can actually swap the small nuclei. And then instead of making a bunch of babies right then and there, they just go on their merry way. And the macronuclei and the micronuclei actually like fuse and then recombine. So each one has the same combination of DNA overall. Okay, so these guys move around using the cilia. We're going to talk about two other ones that have ways of moving around. The next are amoebas. The book calls them Sarcodina. Again, I'm not testing on that one. But if you're looking it up in the book, you might need to look up Sarcodina. Sarcodina look kind of like this. They look kind of like fried eggs, these big blob sort of things. They have the nucleus on the inside. When they want to move somewhere, what they do is they actually extend their membrane and their cytoplasm just down one of these little like projections. So that they get more cytoplasm from over here. These contract inward, these expand outward, and they end up blobbing themselves over in one direction. These little blobby projections are called pseudopods. What's a pseudopod mean? Guys, phones away. Okay? If I see any more phones out, you can go to the locker and put it over there. Pseudo means what?
Two.
Doesn't mean two. Yeah, it's close. It's close to pseudofed, yeah. What about like pseudoscience?
Separated?
Fake.
Fake, yeah. This means false or fake. And then what about pod? Any guess?
Move.
What if you ever go to the podiatrist?
What?
Yeah, your foot. Or feet, I guess. Yeah, pseudopod means false foot. So that's what these little extensions are. They're not real feet, right? They're just blurb. They just blorb over. Also, when they want to eat something, they just kind of engulf it. You know, they surround it with their membrane and then bring it inside. That sort of thing. Some of these guys, some amoebas, especially those that live in the ocean, can form a skeleton.
Is it an exoskeleton or an internal skeleton?
External usually, but they can kind of like, it doesn't matter because they can like morph around things, so it can be like both. It's kind of cool. It's called a test. Is the skeleton they make. Sometimes they make them out of like calcium carbonate, sometimes they make them out of silicone. They're different shapes and sizes and they look completely different, but basically the amoebas can like live inside here. Bloop, bloop. And if they want, they can like reach their little arms out to like help slow their descent, or if they like find some food. So yeah, ones that live in the ocean often make tests. It helps them be buoyant, helps protect them a little bit from other things that come to eat them. Okay, another way these guys can get around are the flagellates. The book calls them zoomastagina. Flagellates use what to get around?
Wait.
They don't use feet.
No, like, here.
Called?
Hair. Teeth.
Called? Not cilia. They're really big. They're called flagella, yes.
Leathers.
Boy, they have just one large flagella.
What is a flagella?
A flagella is a big, long tail that whips back and forth. It actually spins. It spins around in a circle, driving it forward. Sometimes these guys, less amoebas, but rarely. Sometimes flagellates actually have symbiotic algae that grow inside them. Even ciliates can sometimes have symbiotic algae that are growing inside them too. So just keep that in mind. We consider them animal-like, but some of these animal-like ones, even though they can move, can also do photosynthesis, which is pretty cool. So they have like properties of the plant-like ones as well. You can have ones in the ocean, look kind of like this. They have two flagella, one that goes around the outside, one that goes around the side. And that allows them to swim in different directions too. Okay, last sheet.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't done writing.
You weren't done writing that one?
No.
Flagella? Symbiotic algae?
Yeah.
Cool picture.
Yeah.
Flagella.
Alright, I'm done.
Okay, the last group isn't super mobile on its own. We're gonna call, oh, I should do it in red.
You're gonna call me.
Sorry.
Call me.
Let me just do it. The sporozoans, the book calls them apicomplexa.
How did you spell that? It says Z-O-A.
Why not we call them what the book calls them?
Because the book names are terrible. Sporozoan is much more common.
Wait a minute. It says Z-O-A.
S-P-O-R, ignore the first thing, let's just scribble. S-P-O-R-O-Z-O-A-N-S. Sporozoans. And sporozoans are called so because they can form like this live version that's like a little wiggly mobile version. But they can also form a spore-like version. And what's the purpose of forming a spore?
I don't know. Reproduce.
You'd think it'd mostly be for reproduction. The handy thing about the spores is they're more resistant to attacks or the environment. So remember how like the bacteria turn into like little endospores when they like dry up and stuff? It's kind of like that. The spores are less likely to get destroyed by external things like the environment, which means that these guys are actually, the problem with sporozoans is that they're often infectious. Because this little spore-like version doesn't get easily killed by our immune systems. In fact, in the 2010s, how many people died each year from sporozoan infections, you think,
13.
in the whole world?
13 million.
Why? Not funny. 12,000.
The answer is about 500,000 people per year, which is a lot. That is a lot of people. That's the population of Alaska dying every year. That's like war in Ukraine style levels, like every year, right? People, you'd think that people would get on this problem. The problem is, are 500,000 Americans dying each year of this?
No.
No. Does anyone know the name of the disease most common, the most deadly disease caused by sporozoans?
That's a good one. Malaria.
Malaria. Yeah. We don't have a lot of malaria in the US. We don't have a lot of malaria in like Europe, these rich Western countries that have all the like pharmaceutical drug companies and stuff. Malaria. M-A-L-A-R-I-A. The other unfortunate bit, guys, of those 500,000 people that die each year, the real unfortunate part is they're usually kids. And this isn't infected, this is deaths. So it's an incredibly deadly disease. It's been really hard to like stamp down. In fact, it's down from its height of about 2 million a year. So we've made incredible progress over the last like 50 years fighting malaria, but it's still incredibly high. Malaria works through what insect spreads malaria?
Mosquito.
Mosquitoes, yeah. So you have this like,
That's what it is. It's a freaking squeeze. I love mosquitoes.
yeah, so mosquitoes in Alaska don't carry malaria, hooray. But if you go to like sub-Saharan Africa or Borneo or someplace like that, the mosquitoes can transmit when they bite you they have the malaria parasite in their blood, and they like, you know how they release a little bit of their like saliva type stuff to like numb you up and to thin your blood? Well, when they do that, they actually release that malaria parasite into your blood. So it's actually the mobile version. And the mobile version swims down your bloodstream until it finds your liver. And then once in your liver, it hangs out, it makes a whole bunch of babies, multiplies. Question?
Is there a way to avoid that?
Yeah, we'll talk about it in a sec. And then it releases the spore version in your blood, which then affects your blood cells. And it can kill your blood cells. And while it's in your blood there, it can be picked up by any mosquitoes that might bite you, and then spread that to another person. You usually don't get it from like person-to-person contact unless you like get a blood transfusion or share needles, that sort of thing. And then you said, what was the question?
Is there a way to avoid it?
Yeah, what are some ways of breaking this cycle?
You get bit, you cut off the arm.
No.
Good though.
Well, what if you prevent the getting bit in the first place, right?
Mosquito spray.
You could,
Bug spray.
yeah, wear longer clothes. That helps. You could wear bug spray, sure. You can sleep with mosquito nets up, like 'cause a lot of these places are warm enough. You don't need like closed places. But if you sleep in a netted area, that can prevent mosquitoes from biting you while you're sleeping, right? We can kill the mosquitoes. We're not amazing at it, but we got some cool techniques. One way they take mosquitoes, genetically engineer them so they're sterile, and they like release just like billions of sterile male mosquitoes into the environment. And the male mosquitoes go and mate with the females. They have a bunch of eggs that don't hatch, and then you have a lot less mosquitoes the next year. You can go and spray DDT, around. Like everyone goes, oh, DDT, yeah, but if you're saving millions of lives, it might be worth it to
Is there a shot that they
spray
give
something.
before you get by it?
Actually, less than 2 years ago, they developed a vaccine. So these numbers are really expected to plummet over the next 5-10 years as more and more people get the vaccine. The vaccine doesn't prevent you from ever getting bitten or infected, but it prevents you from dying of it, right? Those 500,000 are deaths. So people will still get it's like a COVID shot. You still might get COVID, but you're not gonna get the severe form and die. So hopefully there's signs on the horizon that we're turning a corner on malaria. The very final thing I wanted to cover, we'll squeeze it in the side here, are the fungus-like ones. We'll cover the plant-like ones some other day. Maybe Friday or next week. As far as notes go, we'll start some labs on the plant-like ones then. All right, the fungi-like ones. There's two main groups that I want to talk about. One are slime molds. They're really cool. They can form these like big branching networks. I'm not going to draw it super well here. Anyway, you kind of get the picture. You can form these branchy sort of networks. They are similar to mold in the sense that they eat dead organisms, but they're not mold because they're not a fungus, right? They don't have the same cell wall, and in fact, they can be just like a single-celled organism. They have this complex life cycle. We'll watch a video on them. They're pretty cool. The other one I just want to touch on real quick are water molds. Water molds, same deal. They can live in, guess where? Water, yeah. They can live in underwater if a fish dies and is decomposing or something. Regular fungus doesn't do super well in straight water. But these water molds can actually grow underwater and decompose things. They can also grow in really wet environments, like say inside vegetables. And in many of you probably or a good chunk of you, probably have ancestors that were affected by a famous water mold. Oh, I'm drawing a picture of a potato.
Oh, is this the poison potato?
Yeah,
Is this thing?
yeah. This is the brown is like totally shut. I tried to draw a potato. The Irish potato famine. It was caused by potato blight. Basically, Ireland. Well, who knows what happened in the Irish potato famine?
Ran out of potatoes.
Why?
Disease.
Yeah, the disease. The Irish potato famine was caused by a water mold that they got over on Ireland, and it spread from just field to field to field. They didn't know how to stop it. They didn't contain it. It just wiped out all their potato crops. Within a few years, they didn't have any more potatoes. What happens then?
They died of starvation.
Yeah, some died of starvation. Actually, relatively few did. Most of them did what?
Moved to America.
Yeah, a lot of them like moved to other countries, including America.
Some of them were
The
in touch because
English government wasn't very helpful about it and made the problems worse. And so there's still like conflict today in Ireland. Ireland's not part of the Great Britain, in part because of the Irish potato famine. Okay, we're gonna watch some videos. Enough of that.